I would like to introduce our panelists today. First up, we have Matt Coppola. He is the president of Coppola Enterprises. He is a consulting and IT manager service provider, MSP. And then we have Andrew Hodge. He is president of Anderson Insurance Group, and obviously an avid golfer too. I just have to throw that in. So Anderson Insurance, they are experts in risk management, including cyber insurance. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mike Kasbrak, and he is a strategic account executive with CyberLeaf. And CyberLeaf provides managed cybersecurity services through MSPs like Coppola Enterprises. So, gentlemen, without further ado, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Robin. Again, I'm Matt Coppola with Coppola Enterprises. You've met everybody else. We also have Taylor on the call, and Taylor's with CyberLeaf as well, and he's going to be managing the presentation and kind of capturing and keeping track of questions that might arise. And we encourage you, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button to populate that with any questions that you might have. If it's something that is easily to reply to, Taylor will do so. If not, we will accumulate those and deal with them at the end, either during this or after this, whatever makes the most sense. So we have about 30 minutes of material, I would say, and wanted to leave ample time for, to address questions and concerns and things of that nature. So we're really hoping that you get something out of this, and we believe this is a very important topic for not only manufacturers. I know we have a majority of manufacturers, but I know I've invited some people that are non-manufacturers too. So all content here does apply to both, basically any business. So Taylor, if you would, to the next slide. So what are we going to cover? So there's three main things we want you to get out of this. Is how are you going to manage the risk in your organization? What are the ways that we can reduce and possibly mitigate some of those risks? And lastly, how can we use our insurance as a way to enhance your overall cybersecurity posture to protect your biggest asset, which is your people in your organization? So as you can see there, the main areas we're going to hit on is the 4 ways to manage risk, reasons to enhance your cybersecurity posture, protect and insure through defense in depth. I'm going to give a couple case studies on things that we see as an MSP, some controls that you might be able to put in place, and then Andrew's going to kind of dive into the actual insurance piece of things and how that complements, what Mike and I have already spoken about. So if you would, Taylor, to the next slide, please. Just some general background. What is cybersecurity? There's a million different definitions out there. There's a million different perspectives on it, but in a sense, what it is it's basically processes and practices that you put in place to protect your systems, your networks, your data from breaches and unauthorized entrance into your network and in your facilities. So with that being said, the stuff on the right there, state of cybersecurity, this is my scary to death, statistics slide, as I call it. I don't mean it to be that. We don't mean it to be that, but it just kind of enhances, I guess, the importance of looking at this for all organizations, no matter the size. So if I could run through a couple of these, if you wouldn't mind. So the first one is just staggering to me. Cybercrime is predicted to hit $8 trillion this year and grow to $10.5 trillion by 2025. We're talking about, as Mike taught me, organized crime is what we're talking about. So we're dealing with, in fact, we're getting into where they're even naming their gangs and their organized crime, mechanisms, almost in a come and get me type of scenario, sort of thing. And what's interesting is, it used to be, and they still do, target the big fish, MGM Grand, Dell. The most recent one in the auto industry was the CDK software, which runs a lot of car dealerships that got hacked and shut down dealers across the country, you know, depending on a product brand for, you know, 24, 48, even more hours. So we still have those ones, but now really they're starting to target our small and medium-sized businesses in the manufacturing sector and otherwise. As you can see there, you know, 82% of ransomware attacks are on the small to medium-sized businesses. Why do they do it? Because you guys are easy targets. Not everybody, but I would say in general, most small to easy, you know, medium-sized businesses don't have the things in place, nor do they have potentially the resources and the millions and millions of dollars to spend like these big companies to protect yourself. But it's coming, and it's coming quickly. 80% of businesses that paid a ransom, you know, were hit again. 60% of small businesses that were victims to a cybercrime potentially go out of business in a 6-month period. More than half or more are so they're shutting their businesses down for more than 24 hours, you know, to be able to get back online. And last but not least there, you know, about half of the companies, you know, did not purchase and do not purchase insurance until after, you know, an attack happens. So that's just some background for you on the state of small to medium-sized businesses as it relates to cyber security. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Andrew, who's going to give us some discussion on risk.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. Taylor, go to the next slide. So as Matt said, I mean, we just went through, you know, lots of risks that are, you know, affecting and out there for your business. I live in the risk world every day, all day. And no matter if it's cyber insurance or your general liability, workers' compensation, what have you, I mean, there's 4 ways to manage risk, right? The first way is to avoid it, which you can't really avoid if you want to actually do business, right? The only way to avoid it is to not do business. So we're going to go ahead and just X that out, right? That's not doable. The next way is to reduce, right? So the controls, the security measures that you are able to put in place in your business are the ways that you can reduce your risk, right? Whether it's cyber insurance or anything else. So later on in the presentation, Matt's going to kind of go through some keys that you can implement to help reduce your risk. But as you know, it's hard to eliminate all risk altogether, which leads us to our next way to manage risk, which is transfer. This is really the bucket that I live in on a daily basis. So we're going to hopefully reduce as much risk as possible, but that risk that we can't, we're going to try to transfer it to an insurance company, right? So we're going to pay a premium to transfer the risks that we have and determine what level of risk that we want to transfer in the form of insurance limits and coverages, right? And then the last way to manage risk is to retain it, right? There's some risks out there that, you know what, you decide, hey, you know, my risk tolerance and I'm comfortable with this risk. I don't need to buy insurance. I'm okay with it. I feel like I've reduced it enough and it's not that substantial if something were to happen that I need to have extra coverage, extra insurance, right? Or it could be a situation where, you know what, I want to transfer some risk, but I'm open to retaining the first $10,000 of that risk. And that's where a deductible would come into play from an insurance standpoint. So, you know, those are the 4 main ways and to manage your risk. And they apply to everything and certainly apply to the cyber world that we're going to be talking about today. So Taylor, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so we talked about the 4 ways to manage risk, and we know that the risk is out there, and we're going to go through a few reasons, and these are specific to the manufacturing world that, you know, we really know and we really think that you need to make sure that you've got the proper controls in place, but also beyond that, the adequate insurance coverages in place to protect you. So, you know, the first reason that we've got on here to enhance your cyber posture is manufacturers are being targeted. I mean, a lot of people are surprised to learn that manufacturers are the 3rd most attacked industry. according to the IBM report from 2022, in the United States, behind only financial services and business service providers, right? So I think that's pretty staggering to hear that manufacturers are being targeted at such a high rate. So there's a reason, because a lot of manufacturers also don't think that they have much of exposure, right? They're not handling a ton of sensitive data, they think, but as we'll learn later on in the presentation, there's some large exposures. Next, Taylor. So extortion. This is a huge exposure for manufacturers. Many cyber insurance policies are also not providing adequate coverage and protection when it comes to extortion, as we'll see later. An example that I've seen in real life from a manufacturer with extortion is a cyber criminal hacking in and shutting down and disabling an automated manufacturing line, right, an assembly line. So until that ransom's paid, that line was shut down, which kind of leads us into our third reason for enhancing your cyber posture. And if that manufacturing line is down, you're going to have some business interruption. And, if you can't get that ransomware paid and you don't have coverage to get that ransom paid, that business interruption could last, hours, days, weeks. So business interruption is, I think one of the most crucial coverages that we need to make sure that we look at from a manufacturing perspective, and we'll take a look at later in the presentation. But basically, it could be, any cyber attack that's going to disrupt or disable, corrupt, or shut down your organization's computer network, or it could be an assembly line. So go ahead to the next slide, Taylor. So number 4, privacy laws. This is, everybody's favorite to talk about. But basically, every state, jurisdiction, DC, federal government, they all have their separate privacy laws that require us as businesses to notify customers, vendors, whoever, that if we've potentially leaked any of their personally identifiable information into the world, we have to notify those individuals that that's happened. And in many instances, we have to pay for any kind of monitoring service for an extended period of time. So depending on the states and jurisdictions that you fall under, those can be very, very costly. And then number 5, Taylor, is data destruction, right? This is what we hear, I would say, most of out there. It's important to improve your cyber posture to protect your data, like that hackers are trying to destroy, or even rogue employees are trying to destroy. A lot of times, we think of, exposures from outside our organization trying to get in, but very rarely do we think of those employees that may be disgruntled, that are already inside of our organization and that have access to a ton of information. And because you had a tough mid-year review with them, they decide to start transferring money out or change some passwords, and now you can't get access to the data that you need. So, exposures for your organization not are only coming in from the outside, but a lot of times we're seeing exposures from the inside that are affecting a lot of our businesses. Matt, I think we're going to turn it back over to you and talk about some controls that we can put in place to hopefully mitigate some of these exposures.
Sure. So what we want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about it more to, I guess, a higher level, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Kasperdak to take a little bit of a deeper dive. But what we're going to show you here are some of the controls that not only need to be in place to qualify for a cyber insurance policy, but probably even more importantly, put the controls in place so that you don't have to use your cybersecurity policy. I mean, it's like one of those things you hope you never have to use it, but you're glad that you have it, sort of thing. So first is multi-factor authentication. I would assume everybody on the call is familiar with this at some level. This could be as simple as, we try to log into your bank and they want to text you a code to plug in. So, further continue, with logging into the bank, or, in your business world, whether it be if you're using, Microsoft 365 for your email or whatever the authenticator app that you have to be able to log in. So that's what this is talking about, is a world where a username and a password is not good enough. You need something that's on your person to be able to verify that it's you before you log into it. Taylor? This is pretty self-explanatory. Cybersecurity training. This is important because we are always going to have humans involved in our businesses. At least I would assume in our lifetimes, sort of thing. So you're always going to have human error. What you can do is do preventative things to reduce the chance of somebody clicking on an email, reduce the chance of somebody opening an attachment, and things like that create great exposure, and things of that nature. So cybersecurity can be anything from annual trainings to, doing phishing simulations on emails where we send out the fake emails and see who clicks on them and collect data and rearrange training and things as it relates to that. Taylor? No. Defense in depth, which I'm not going to steal all of Mike's thunder, but defense in depth is kind of the crux of the controls that you put in place. It's the tools and the processes that kind of work in concert in a layered approach to protect you. So, to get into a little bit of it, it's things like your EDR, your antivirus, dark web monitoring, data that's reporting from your network, collecting that and analyzing it. So it's basically the things that are monitoring your systems and protecting your systems. Segregated backups. The days where somebody was designated to change the tape in the server is over. You change the tape and throw it in your car, throw it in your drawer. We're well beyond that. We live in a world now where data should be backed up, stored off site, whether it be in a cloud environment, or something of that nature. The data should be encrypted so that if you do get, penetration into your network, that they can't then get to your backups as well and corrupt those. And I would assume most people that we're talking with have some sort of backup structure in place. And then lastly, the vulnerability management, which I would say a lot of people don't do. And this is the testing, testing your controls, right? Penetration testing, your risk assessment, your things of that nature, where most people, I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people are only doing this if they're required, by a customer to do these sorts of things, or have requirements for some of the compliance things like NIST or CMMC, things of that nature. So these are kind of the 5 areas that we look at, in terms of protection on our end. And these are kind of the 5 areas that Andrew and the insurance, world would look at in terms of how well prepared are you, which obviously affects your, are you insurable, number 1, and what kind of rates can we give you, number 2, sort of thing. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mike from CyberLeaf. I think doing a little bit more due diligence on the defense in depth is important because it's kind of the crux of the whole thing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. And, this is for everyone here. Thanks again for attending. And this is, as you're trying to sift through insurance and cybersecurity and run your business, right? This gets it can be complex. It can be complicated, right? So it can be very hard to navigate. And fortunately, you've got resources that can help you understand. And Taylor, if you just go through the animation so they can see the entire wheel, right there. There's an institution, and Matt mentioned NIST before. Some of you in manufacturing need to be compliant within certain NIST regulations, right? But NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, right? And 10 years ago, they created a framework around cybersecurity, really specifically for critical infrastructure and financial services, but around this idea of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, right? And if you focus on each one of those areas, right, then you should have a good framework in place for your cybersecurity strategy. Well, it's been 10 years, but they just put out a new version. The NIST CSF 2.0 includes govern. And one of the main reasons, right, is what Matt talked about earlier, right, is that they realized that this wasn't exclusive, should not be exclusive to critical infrastructure. This should not be exclusive to financial services. Everyone who's running a business, everyone who's involved with an organization should be protecting their data, their organization with some type of cybersecurity strategy similar to this, right? And as you're looking at this, you see all these different pieces, right? When you start talking about identify, that's where we're talking about end user training and folks understanding what might look like an issue, right? And then layering that on with things like a protective DNS, right? When you go to protect, so this we're using what we would call a layered strategy, fixing problems or eliminating vulnerabilities with tools, but we're taking that a step further to what we call defense in depth by having all of these coordinated, so there isn't one single point of failure. So a great example is the security awareness training. A bad email comes in, an employee clicks on that has a malicious IP address associated with it. There's a tool in place that recognizes that link goes to a malicious website, and we're shutting that down, right? So there isn't one single point of failure when you're doing a defense in depth strategy versus just layered security, right? So when you're talking about protection, that's another thing. Some of you are familiar with antivirus or endpoint detection, and you might be familiar with a product like a SentinelOne. They do a lot of marketing. They've got this nice color of purple. It's a great product. It protects you at the endpoint levels. It protects your workstations. It protects your servers. It's not necessarily protecting, what's going on inside your network traffic and things like that. So you need to make sure that as you're looking at all these pieces, that you have the right tool or strategy in place that encompasses everything. And that's what someone, as you're focusing on your business, that's what somebody like Matt can help you with, to make sure not only that you're protected, but then when you go to talk to somebody like Andrew, you've got the proper controls in place to also be able to leverage the best coverage you possibly can as well. So anything else you want me to hit on specifically there, Matt?
Hey, Matt, you're muted.
You're muted.
No, Mike, thank you. That was good. The only thing I wanted to add is that, when we made a jump from traditional antivirus to, endpoint detection and response, I like to call that antivirus on steroids. For a while, that was the end all be all that was going to solve all the problems as it relates to cyber security. But the whole goal here is that we stay in front of the criminals. And that's what this technology is doing. It's layering upon layering upon layering to make sure, as Mike said, there's not one single point of failure, but doing it not only with the tools, which is not the end all be all, but the systems and processes as well. So,
and just one other thing I'd mention, Matt, sorry, when you're looking at the detect and the respond side of this wheel, it's important to understand, it's important to work with somebody like Matt who knows this stuff and can let you know the appropriate type of support you're looking for. Because if you're working, say, if you're a manufacturer whose work has a government contract or is in the supply chain where you're working within the federal government, you might be required to use U.S. exclusive resources, and not every security operations center is headquartered or employed by strictly U.S. employees. So it's important to understand what exactly it is you need to meet your criteria. And somebody like Matt can help you in those situations.
Okay. Couple examples of what I've seen in my travels, let's call it, through living in the MSP world and helping people. We had a situation with one of our manufacturing customers where they had a fairly sizable customer that they deal with, and large percentage of their business, and through email and then subsequently through phone calls, they got notified by a cyber criminal that they had this customer's information and they were going to hold the information hostage, which obviously caused great concern, for this customer. So doing the right thing. They did reach out to their customer and alert them of the situation. And thankfully, the end result was that they actually they spoofed and didn't actually have the information, but it obviously created a level of awareness, not only, with our client, but the customer, to say, okay, what's next? And what we did is we basically scrubbed and rebuilt the network, was the immediate fix, but the long-term fix was, we did implement the, a defense in depth strategy, which, created two things: an immediate sense of relief for this major customer that they had, that they understood what they needed to have in place. And then secondly, a level of confidence in this, that our customer could not only is protected, but actually getting them more work. So what I wanted to add is that, we look at these things, and as you analyze it, we see dollar signs, and we see costs, and we see, additional fees that we have to pay to be protected or pay for insurance. I always like to try to think of things, how can we use what we have in place as a differentiator from other people that you're bidding against or other vendors that are out there? And in a lot of cases, you can use this. Here's our cybersecurity posture, where there's a sense of confidence that you can gain with a potentially new customer. Or secondly, sometimes it's a barrier to entry. We're getting to a point where, remember the days of those of you manufacturers out there, you had to have ISO 9001 to be able to do work for a customer. Well, we're getting to a point where, NIST compliance, CMMC compliance, a lot of these things need to be in place as a point of entry and potentially a barrier to doing business. So I always like to try to think of it, how do I turn this money I'm spending around to use it as something that can be a proactive measure in dealing with my customers. One more quick example. This just happened recently. We have another customer that does have a defense in depth strategy in place, and got a phone call, a email, and a text message at 10 o'clock on Friday night through our, security operations center that's doing the monitoring for us on the 24/7, saying, hey, we're seeing, traffic from Tel Aviv hit this network. Is that right? And obviously the answer was, we don't think so. So we were immediately able to go in, shut that traffic down, for the remainder of the weekend, and then address it with the customer on Monday. Is this something that's legitimate? So we were able to be proactive, shut it down before there was any penetration into the network. So just a couple examples that I guess I've lived in the last, few months here that I thought might be of relevance for us. So with that being said, Andrew is going to get into some of the specific insurance requirements and needs for you next.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Matt. So, Matt and Mike just went through a lot of really good controls, and measures that you can, hopefully you've implemented some, but that you can implement together to really best position yourself for the best terms, conditions, and pricing for your insurance program. So, Taylor, go ahead and just put all three up there. We'll start with terms, right? And terms are simply the coverages that the insurance company agrees to provide you, right? So, you buy a standard business liability policy, you get $1 million of coverage per incident with a $2 million aggregate, right? That's the terms that you've purchased, and the insurance company agrees to provide that. Same thing on the cyber side, right? A lot of cyber policies will start with a boilerplate $1 million of coverage in your terms, and the insurance company agrees to provide you that coverage for the premium that they charge you. Speaking of premium, that's your pricing, right? So that's as simple as it sounds, right? Again, insurance company is going to give you some coverage. You got to pay your premium for it. Now, you'll notice you got conditions sandwiched in there, and I kind of skipped over it. And that's simply because most people skip over, and most agents skip over that really important section. The conditions are where you're going to find really what your policy is providing you. Okay, so in the conditions, you've got potential exclusions of coverage, potential sublimits of coverage, potential controls that might have to be in place for coverage to even respond, right? So, on that application that you breeze through and e-signed, there could have been a section in there that says, hey, if you don't have multi-factor authentication up and running at the time of loss, we're not paying. Okay, so this is the fine print that's in the back of the contract that most people ignore, that really do drive the coverage that you're getting in the policy. So super important. If your agent's not going through it with you, they should be. You need to be paying attention to it. And if they're not going through it, you need to call me. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Taylor. So, the buckets of coverage that a typical cyber insurance policy provides. You've got your third-party coverage first, you got first-party coverage, and then a bucket that a lot of people forget about or don't mention is the crime bucket, right? And so third-party coverage simply should be thought as, coverage for others. Okay, so this bucket provides liability coverage for a business that could be responsible for a client system or network. If that business makes a mistake that leads to a data breach or a cyber attack on the customer's network, that client might decide to sue. So third-party coverage is insurance that can help cover your business's legal expenses if you were to leak other data, right? So notification costs fall in that bucket. Regulatory fines and penalties fall in that bucket. So that's typically the first part of a cyber insurance policy. Second part is your first party coverage. Now this you can think of as like coverage for me. It's coverage for your business. So this bucket is providing coverage to help reduce the financial impact associated with a data breach or a cyber attack. So it helps cover the cost of extortion, threats, business interruption would fall in this bucket. Customer notification cost if you directly leak their data or personally identifiable information, and then also business reputation restoration would all fall into this bucket. And then the last bucket of your typical insurance or cyber insurance policy is the crime bucket. So, coverage for your business if an internal employee were to be the culprit of a cyber incident. I mentioned earlier, maybe you got a disgruntled employee that decides to, take the information they know about the banking account information for the business and start transferring money out. So this would be the bucket that would cover that internal exposure that you have from a cyber incident. So, unauthorized electronic funds transfers fall into that bucket, like we said. Invoice manipulation we see in the manufacturing world sometimes. You've got an employee that, you got a customer that purchases 1,000 widgets at $100. Well, they decide to, charge $110 per widget and figure out a way to collect that extra 10 per widget into some other account. Or even telephone fraud would be considered in that final crime bucket. So those are three main buckets. On the next couple slides, we'll see, you'll see those broken out, and then we'll try to go through a real world example of a manufacturing client that we had from a starting point to where we ultimately were able to go. So go ahead to those slides, Taylor. So here you can see on the left-hand side what a typical business owner thinks they have as far as cyber insurance, right? Yeah, we got $1 million of coverage. I think we might have like a $10,000 deductible or something, and I don't know, we pay like six grand a year. That's what we've got. What can you do? Can you do better? That's typically the starting point that I get from an insured. So, and typically it's like, well, okay, great, but let's actually dive in and take a look at what you really have, right? And so on the right-hand side is the actual policy the customer has. So you can see they've got $1 million in coverage, but it's just in a couple scenarios, right? So as we read through the conditions and the exclusions of the policy, most of the coverages either had sublimits or in many instances were just completely excluded at all. some specific ones to note. You've got, privacy and security liability at $1 million, and then you've got the breach response and expense at $1 million under first party coverage. But it's when you look back up to third party, notification costs, which can be one of the largest items in a data breach or a loss, a cyber loss, and that's sub-limited at $500,000. And then regulatory fines and penalties is sub-limited at $250,000. Also can be much more expensive than that if you have a loss, depending on the amount of customers that you have and types of vendors that you're using. So, and then from a manufacturing specific perspective, you've got ransomware and extortion loss and first party coverage. And you'll see that in the conditions, that's actually excluded in this policy, completely excluded. So no coverage. So if this client's manufacturing line were have to been attacked in a ransomware attack, there would have been no coverage at all. They would have had to come up with the funds on their own to unlock that system and get it running again. And then you'll see the dependent network interruption was not included, as well as hardware replacement costs were excluded. And then in the crime coverage, they had very, very little crime coverage. So they did have a small electronic funds transfer coverage, but other than that, everything else was excluded. So the next slide, you'll see some of the improvements we were able to make to the policy. So yeah, thanks, Taylor. So on the left-hand side, you'll still see the typical cyber insurance policy that we started with. Right-hand column, where we're ultimately able to go, right? And main reason that we were able to get to where we ended up on the right there was we were successful in having the client start implementing some improved cybersecurity controls. By improving those controls, you're able to not only help alleviate some pricing relief on your cyber insurance, but it also opens you up to a lot more coverage limits. You care, say, okay, these guys have proper controls in place, and because of that, we're willing to offer higher limits. Not only that, they also were able to be given the option for multiple deductible levels. So you'll see, it just says example on the right, but that's because this client was given the option to have a deductible level as low as $1,000 or as high as $25,000. And I think, as you'll see on the right, we didn't have any sublimits, we didn't have any exclusions on the coverages that are listed. But I think the $25,000 deductible level ended up being about the same price as the column on the left. So much better coverage for about the same price because they had controls implemented, and we knew where to look for exclusions and make sure that they were no longer there. So hopefully that example and explanation is helpful on what to look for in a cyber policy, what to pay attention to as far as the conditions, exclusions, sublimits, and please go through your own if you already have one. If you don't, you need one. You need a cyber insurance policy if you don't have one already. And if you do and you'd like to go through it, I'm happy to help and analyze anything for you. Matt, I'll let you take it back over and
sure,
kind of wrap up the presentation.
So we're kind of reaching the end of the presentation here, but a few takeaways is, cyber criminals do have their sights on manufacturers or even more so small to medium-sized businesses. And because, again, they're easy targets per se in a lot of instances. So they're looking for quick wins where they can generate income. That's the first thing that you need to understand. You need to think about, in some ways, enhancing your cybersecurity, posture, not only to protect yourself, but to put you in a better position, as it relates to premiums on your cyber insurance. And the one note I wanted to make here is that I think a lot of businesses now are operating in terms of, we have all these insurances that are in place for liability and things of that nature. We have some controls in place, and then we're going to bolt this cybersecurity posture or this cybersecurity insurance, plan on top of it. And I think what we're trying to express upon you is that these things all need to work in tandem, and I think Andrew gets into a lot of circumstances, just through my discussions with him, where he's, through analysis and whatnot, we can reallocate funds to the appropriate buckets where they're giving you the most coverage, where your most risk exposure is. So I think what we're trying to do is get people off the hamster wheel, just bolting on these cyber policies because people know they need it and it's a hot topic right now. And you have insurance companies that are dangling the carrot and charging huge premiums, without giving you all the information. And last but not least, cyber is now a mission critical, thing for our manufacturers. It's got to be at the forefront of your mind. There's too many stories out there of businesses that have had to shut their doors because of a breach, in cyber, and criminals are getting smarter. And anything you can do to stay ahead of what the criminals are doing obviously puts you in a better position, as a company. So with that being said, if there's any questions, I just looked. I didn't see any in the chat there. I know, Robin, you had a couple of things when we were just chatting before. So if you would, or Taylor, did you write those down? I can't remember which. All right, the first one there, email phishing scams are getting more and more sophisticated. How can we teach our employees? I'll start, and Mike, feel free to jump in. So, knowledge is power, is what I'll tell you, and redundancy is important. So we talked about things like cybersecurity training. We talked about things about phishing campaigns that are out there. I think the more you can implement those things, the more you can make people aware, and I guess really thorough in terms of opening their emails. If there's any doubt, don't open them, sort of thing. But that only goes so far. And again, that's why you need to have this layered backbone that if something does happen, that you're able to catch it so it doesn't permeate the network. Mike, did I get?
I think you got everything. I mean, I think it's the training piece. It's talking to your folks and making sure they understand, like, this is something that's happening. Be vigilant. Everyone gets caught up in their day-to-day, but it's important that if they suspect something isn't right, then there's a good chance it isn't, and make sure that they're communicating with the appropriate folks inside your organization.
All right, what was the other one?
It looks like the second question there, Matt, is what are some of the major vulnerabilities that manufacturers are facing today?
I can address that if you'd like, or Andrew, I guess you could as well. But the one thing that I'm seeing is it kind of relates to the first question. I mean, one of the major vulnerabilities is people. We have people, and they're doing their jobs, and they click on things that they shouldn't click on. That's one of the major vulnerabilities that we see, or quite frankly, not really having anything in place. And I live in the manufacturing world. That's who we work with. I understand that people have, for example, a piece of inspection equipment that still runs a Windows XP machine because that's where the software is housed. I understand those vulnerabilities exist, but that's what I see as I travel, the landscape, is that either people are, using old technology, old hardware, or don't have a choice in some circumstances. They need to use that hardware because of the great cost that it would be to upgrade those systems and things of that nature. So, although putting a defense in depth, posture in place, isn't free by any means, and it's not, but with that being said, it does put you in a better position to protect your overall, environment.
Yeah, and Matt, I would just add, especially because we're everything in our world now is so connected, right? Everybody on this call has a smartphone or a watch or the smart glasses, right? At your home, you can probably connect through, an app to do something on your fridge or your washer or dryer, right? And so all of these devices, as they connect to your network inside of your business, can be potential vulnerabilities. And I know we didn't totally get it. You know, just as an example, Matt mentioned the MGM Grand earlier. It was a big casino that had an attack, but about a year prior to that, I believe it was Caesars was breached, and it all started because someone found a vulnerability inside a thermometer on one of their inside of a thermometer in one of their fish tanks on the casino floor. They found a vulnerability in there. They gained access into that, and then they were able to spider web into the network. So it's really, you know, the bad actors are finding any which way they can get inside a network once they're ready to go, and it's through those types of things that you wouldn't think necessarily needed to be detected or be protected. And while you're not putting like a ransomware agent or a antivirus on something like that, through the appropriate solution, you can see different traffic and anomalous behavior on a piece of equipment like that, and understand that, hey, something's not right. We need to investigate this and do it in a quick, in a timely manner.
I do see there's another question there from Maxwell as it relates to what does cyber awareness training look like, on-site, off-site activities, annual onboarding. Yes is the answer. There's a lot of ways to approach it. I mean, there's multiple platforms out there that give you a vehicle to push out, cyber training to your employees, whether it be through a link and then they take a test and it gives you a score. I would say that doing it as part of the onboarding process is a must, to allow people to understand your position and the importance of this kind of stuff. And then some kind of refresher, annual ongoing type of thing is of importance, especially as new threats. We find new threats, whether it be a new phishing attack or a new vulnerability that exists. And again, there's platforms out there and resources out there that can help you push it out. I think on site, bringing somebody in to do some training is fine too, but I also believe based on people's schedules, sometimes that's hard to pull a group together for a in-person on-site training. But I think it's got to be a cultural thing in our opinion. You have to. It's not like, check the box, I did my training and now I can move on and fill out my payroll information. It's like, this is part of our culture. One person can cause an organization millions and millions of dollars by doing the wrong thing, and they need to understand, how much power that is they have in their hands. Not to scare them, but just create understanding. So I believe it needs to start with the top management saying, this is of importance to our organization, and we're going to mandate that this stuff occurs. Anything else? All right. So I'll take the no more typing as we're done answering questions. So again, I just wanted to thank everybody for their attendance. Thank the NWIRC and Robin specifically for helping us get this together and creating the material to get it out to people. And again, we are happy to share the presentation with you in any way, shape, or form. Robin has recorded this. So if you want to share it with somebody else in your organization, feel free to do that. And then, obviously, if you have any questions you'd like to ask on a one-on-one basis, there's our information in terms of who presented today, and we're happy to assist you in any way that we possibly can. So again, thank you very much for your time and allowing us to steal your lunch hour today.